I arrived last at my late brother's estate that morning, though not by choice. The driver they'd sent had forgotten my pickup time, leaving me to catch a taxi in the rain. When I finally entered the oak-paneled study, every head turned with irritation rather than sympathy. My nieces and nephews sat in their designer suits, whispering behind perfectly manicured hands. At the center of the room, Mr. Kavanaugh shuffled papers with the grim efficiency of a man about to deliver bad news. I took the only empty chair, water still dripping from my coat onto the Persian rug. Nobody offered me a towel. When the lawyer reached my name in the will, his voice barely rose above a whisper. To my sister, Meredith Vale Whitmore, I leave one item, a small, rusted key. The room erupted in snickers. My nephew Liam couldn't contain his smirk. Guess even Dad thought you'd never learn to open anything worthwhile, Aunt Meredith. My hands trembled as Mr. Kavanaugh placed the key in my palm. It was tarnished, bent slightly at the edges, tied with a faded blue ribbon that looked older than my memories. Everyone else received substantial gifts. Cash payments, property deeds, trust fund documentation. My brother Charles had been thorough in dividing his wealth among them. But for me, his only sister, there was just this piece of corroded metal. I turned the key over in my fingers while the lawyer droned through the remaining details. The ribbon caught the chandelier light, and something stirred in my memory, a flicker of recognition I couldn't quite place. I'd seen that particular shade of blue before, that specific way the fabric was tied. Charles had always been deliberate about everything. He wouldn't have left me something meaningless, would he? As the reading concluded, my relatives gathered in clusters, already discussing how they'd spend their inheritance. Nobody approached me. Nobody offered condolences for our shared loss. I slipped the key into my pocket and left without saying goodbye. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective. I stood on the steps of that grand house, gripping the key like it was the only solid thing left in my world. That night, I sat in my small apartment turning the key over and over. The blue ribbon was silk, aged but carefully preserved. The key itself showed signs of deliberate wear, not from use, but from being handled, treasured even. I tried to remember when I'd last seen Charles alone, really spoken to him. It had been months before his death, a brief phone call where he'd sounded tired but oddly at peace. "Take care of yourself, Meredith," he'd said. "And remember, things aren't always what they appear to be." I'd thought he was being philosophical. Now I wondered if it had been a warning. The next morning, I woke with sudden clarity. The cottage. Our family had owned a small property in Norwood Hollow, a place Charles had sealed off 40 years ago when he'd inherited the land. As children, we'd been forbidden from going near it. He'd put a heavy padlock on the door, claiming it was unsafe. I grabbed my coat and the key, my heart racing with possibility. Maybe Charles hadn't forgotten me after all. The drive to Norwood Hollow took an hour through winding country roads. The cottage appeared exactly as I remembered, overgrown with ivy, windows dark and dusty, surrounded by trees that had grown wild without care. The padlock on the door was old and rusted, matching my key perfectly. My hands shook as I inserted it. The lock resisted at first, decades of disuse making it stubborn. Then, with a grinding click, it opened. I pushed the door, and it swung inward with a groan. Inside, dust motes danced in the shaft of light from the doorway. But something felt wrong, not abandoned but arranged. The furniture sat positioned deliberately, not randomly left behind. In the center of the main room was a small table I didn't remember, and on it rested a single white envelope with my name written in Charles's distinctive handwriting. I approached it slowly, afraid of what I might find. The envelope wasn't sealed, just tucked closed. Inside was a letter and a folded piece of paper that looked like an old ledger page. Charles's letter was brief, but pointed. "If you're reading this, Meredith, then I trust you still believe in keeping your word. Look deeper. The truth has been waiting for someone brave enough to find it." The ledger page showed two sets of initials, MVW and CW, my maiden initials and his. Below them, columns of numbers stretched down the page, all leading to a figure circled in red ink, $47 million. My vision blurred. 47 million. That couldn't be real. But the documentation looked authentic, dated, and signed by our father decades ago. I scan the room again, looking for answers. That's when I noticed the irregularity in the floor beneath the table. The boards didn't quite match the rest of the room. I moved the table aside, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. There, outlined in dust, was a trapdoor with a metal ring handle. I pulled it up, revealing stairs descending into darkness. A light switch sat just inside the opening. I flipped it, and weak yellow light illuminated stone steps leading down into what looked like a cellar. The underground room was larger than I'd expected, stretching beyond the cottage's footprint. Metal shelving units lined the walls, each holding identical gray file boxes labeled with dates spanning from the early 80s to just months ago. In the center stood a table with more documents spread across its surface. I approached slowly, scanning the papers. Legal agreements, property deeds, investment records, all bearing the header Whitmore Foundation, Silent Benefactors Agreement. Our father's signature appeared on multiple documents, alongside names I recognized from Cleveland's business elite. The foundation had been secretly acquiring properties, funding hospitals, investing in small technology companies that had apparently become giants. Everything was meticulously documented, every dollar accounted for. But what struck me most was finding my name listed as a trustee alongside Charles's. I'd never signed anything, never agreed to any of this. Yet here I was, apparently part of a $47 million foundation I'd never known existed. The last document on the table was dated just 3 days before Charles died. It required 2 signatures. His was already there, but the line beside it sat empty, waiting for mine. I spent hours in that cellar, reading through files that told the story of a family legacy I'd never known. Our parents had started the foundation in their 30s, using modest inheritances to quietly support causes they believed in. Charles had taken over management after they died, maintaining the secrecy with almost paranoid dedication. But why keep it from me? Why let me believe I was just the forgotten sister while he built this empire? I took photographs of key documents with my phone, then carefully returned everything to its place. As I climbed back up the stairs, exhaustion hit me. It was nearly dark outside. I locked the cottage behind me and headed to my car, my mind spinning with questions. That's when I noticed the black sedan parked down the road, its tinted windows reflecting the dying light. It hadn't been there when I arrived. I got in my car quickly and drove away, watching my rearview mirror. The sedan followed, keeping a steady distance behind me all the way back to the highway. Only when I merged into traffic did it finally turn off, disappearing down a side road. The next morning, I returned to the cottage to make copies of everything. But when I unlocked the door, my stomach dropped. The cellar was exactly as I'd left it. File boxes in place, table undisturbed. Except the ledger, the one with the $47 million figure, was gone. Someone had been here overnight. I searched frantically, checking every box, every shelf. All the other documents remained, but that crucial page had vanished. In its place on the table lay a single Polaroid photograph. It showed me standing at the cottage door yesterday, key in hand. On the back, written in red ink that matched the circle on the missing ledger, were 5 words. They're watching. Trust no one. My hands trembled as I pocketed the photo. Charles had warned me to look deeper, but he hadn't warned me I'd be walking into danger. I locked the cottage and drove straight to the nearest police station. But as I pulled into the parking lot, my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A man's voice, smooth and controlled, spoke without introduction. Dr. Whitmore, we need to talk about what you found. I represent certain interests that would prefer the foundation remain private. I gripped the phone tighter. Who is this? Someone who knew your brother well. He understood the importance of discretion. I hope you do too. The line went dead. I sat in my car, staring at the police station entrance. If I went in now, would they even believe me? I had photographs of documents, but no physical proof. The crucial ledger was gone. And whoever was watching me clearly had resources I didn't. I decided to call the one person I thought I could trust, Mr. Kavanaugh, the lawyer who'd read the will. He'd known Charles for years, handled all his legal affairs. Surely he could explain what was happening. When I reached his office, his secretary said he was in a meeting but could see me in an hour. I waited in the lobby, watching every person who entered, jumping at every sound. When Kavanaugh finally called me in, his expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Kavanaugh's office smelled of old books and expensive cologne. He gestured to a chair across from his massive desk, then poured himself bourbon without offering me any. "How are you holding up, Meredith?" he asked, but his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "I found something at the cottage," I said carefully, watching his face. "Documents about a foundation my parents started. Charles left me a key." His hand froze for just a moment before he continued pouring. "The cottage was condemned years ago. Whatever you found there is likely just old family records, nothing significant." But I'd caught the lie. His jaw had twitched, his voice had gone up half a tone. "Who condemned it?" I asked. "My brother or you?" Kavanaugh set down his glass with deliberate care. "Your brother was very private about certain matters. Perhaps it's best to respect his wishes." His phone rang then, and he excused himself to take the call in his private bathroom. He left his briefcase open on the desk beside me. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me to lean forward and peer inside. There, clipped to a file folder, was a photocopy of the missing ledger page. My heart hammered as I pulled out my phone and took a quick photo of the page in Kavanaugh's briefcase. In the margin, written in his handwriting, were 3 words: "Delivered to Crestwood. Confidential." I barely had time to put everything back before I heard the bathroom door opening. Kavanaugh emerged, his professional smile firmly in place. "Now, where were we?" I stood, suddenly wanting to be anywhere but there. "I should go. Thank you for your time." He walked me to the door, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. "Meredith, some secrets are buried for good reason. Your brother understood that. I hope you'll too." Outside, I sat in my car and examined the photo I'd taken. Crestwood. That name appeared in several of the foundation documents I'd photographed at the cottage. A quick internet search revealed Crestwood Holdings, a private equity firm headquartered downtown. The CEO was listed as Alan Crestwood, 48, Harvard MBA. His photo showed a man with sharp features and colder eyes. I needed help. Someone who understood finance and could make sense of what I'd found. I called my late husband's former accountant, Nolan Price. He'd helped me navigate the aftermath of James's death 3 years ago, had been patient with my questions about estates and trusts. Nolan met me at a coffee shop far from downtown, away from eyes I now knew were watching. I showed him everything, the photos of the foundation documents, the picture of the ledger page, the note about Crestwood. He studied them for a long time, his expression growing darker with each swipe. "Meredith," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This account shouldn't exist. On paper, I mean, look at the routing number." He zoomed in on one of my photos. This institution was shut down in the 90s. The account should have been closed and transferred. He pulled out his laptop and started typing rapidly. But if someone wanted to hide money, really hide it, they might maintain a ghost account like this. Transactions would be almost impossible to trace. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Based on these investment records?" "Easily 47 million, probably more with compound interest." He looked up at me, his face grave. "Meredith, this isn't just about inheritance. Someone has been actively managing this money, moving it through shell companies. And they've forged documents to do it." He turned his laptop to show me a scanned signature. Mine, apparently authorizing transfers I'd never made. The forged signatures were perfect. My handwriting, my distinctive way of crossing my T's, even the slight smudge I always made with my left hand. "When were these supposed to have been signed?" I asked. Nolan checked the dates. "Most are from the past 5 years. Some as recent as last month. After Charles died. Someone had been actively using my identity to move foundation money. We need to go to the authorities," I said, but Nolan shook his head. "With forged documents this good? They'll investigate you first. You need proof of who really did this, not just evidence that it happened. He closed his laptop and leaned forward. Meredith, I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear me. Whatever this is, it's not just about money. It's about ownership of your family's legacy, your parents' intentions, your brother's final wishes. Someone is trying to erase you from a story you were always meant to be part of. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Charles, about the key he'd left me. It wasn't just to unlock the cottage. It was meant to unlock the truth. At 2 a.m, my motion sensor light flickered on outside my kitchen window. I peeked through the curtains and saw a shadow move past my garage. The smell reached me before I saw anything. Expensive cologne, the same scent from Kavanaugh's office. Someone was outside my house. I grabbed my phone and called 911, then armed myself with the fireplace poker from my living room. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. Whoever wanted to scare me was about to learn I didn't frighten easily. The police arrived within minutes, their lights flooding my quiet street. But by then, the intruder was gone. The officers found where someone had forced open my study window, though nothing inside appeared disturbed. Probably just kids, one officer said, but I knew better. After they left, I checked my study more carefully. Everything seemed in place. My desk, my files, my late husband's books still lined up on the shelf. Then I noticed what was missing. The Polaroid photograph, the one showing me at the cottage with the warning on the back. It was gone from where I'd hidden it in my desk drawer. In its place lay another photograph, this one older, the colors slightly faded. It showed Charles standing in what looked like a library, his expression serious. Behind him, blurred but visible in the reflection of a window, stood a man I now recognized. Alan Crestwood. That photograph changed everything. It proved Charles had known Crestwood personally, had been in the same room with him. I studied every detail, looking for clues about when and where it was taken. The books behind Charles looked familiar, leather-bound classics like the ones in our father's study before Charles sold the family house. Then I noticed the date stamp in the corner, 3 days before Charles died. My brother hadn't died of natural causes. Everyone said it was a heart attack, sudden and unexpected. But Charles had been healthy, active, careful about his diet. And now I had evidence he'd been meeting with Crestwood just days before his death. I needed to go back to the cottage. If Charles had left me that key knowing something was wrong, there had to be more hidden there. Something beyond the cellar I'd already found. I waited until dawn, then drove to Norwood Hollow. This time I brought a flashlight, a crowbar, and my phone fully charged. The cottage looked innocent in the morning light, just an abandoned building overtaken by nature. But I knew better now. Inside, I went straight to the cellar and began examining the walls. The shelving units were bolted to the stone, but behind one section, I found a loose panel. The panel came away to reveal a small cavity in the wall. Inside was a plastic bag containing a microcassette recorder, the kind nobody had used in decades. My hands trembled as I pressed play. Charles's voice filled the cellar, weary but steady. If you're hearing this, Meredith, then I didn't make it. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. I'm sorry I let them convince me you couldn't be trusted. Static crackled. Then his voice continued. The foundation was supposed to help people continue what Mom and Dad started. But they've been using it as a laundering front for almost a decade. I only discovered the truth 6 months ago, and by then it was too late. They own Kavanaugh. They own half the board. They own everything except the core trust, which legally requires your signature to dissolve. A pause, then. I left everything where it belongs with you. Protect it. And Meredith, if anything happens to me, it's because I got too close to proving what they've done. The recording ended in a burst of static. I rewound it and played it again, listening more carefully this time. In the background, beneath Charles's voice, I caught something I'd missed before. Another voice, faint and distant, whispering a single word, Meredith. I brought the tape to Nolan. He had equipment that could enhance old recordings, pull out background noise, and make it clear. We spent 3 hours in his home office, running the audio through filters and amplifiers. When he finally played the cleaned-up version, we both froze. The background voice wasn't Alan Crestwood. It was Mr. Kavanaugh. Meredith won't know what's real, his voice said. Just make it look like he died naturally. The sister is easy to discredit. No family, no money, no credibility. My hands curled into fists. The lawyer who'd read Charles's will with shaking hands, who'd offered sympathy with hollow eyes, he'd been part of murdering my brother. We take this to the FBI, Nolan said, but I shook my head. Not yet. Kavanaugh is smart. He'll have covered his tracks, have explanations for everything. We need more. We need to make them think I'm giving up while we gather everything we can. Over the next week, I played the perfect defeated sister. I called Kavanaugh and told him I was overwhelmed, that I wanted nothing to do with the foundation. I even met with Alan Crestwood, pretending to negotiate a quiet settlement. Alan Crestwood's office overlooked the river, all glass and steel and tasteful modern art. He poured me whiskey before I asked, neat and expensive, the way Charles used to drink it. You could have had everything if you'd just signed when you were supposed to, he said, settling into his chair with the confidence of someone who'd never lost. I tilted my head, playing confused. Signed what? He froze, just for a moment. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. The transfer documents. Kavanaugh said you'd been briefed about. He stopped, realizing his mistake. I'd caught him admitting there were documents I should have been shown, agreements I should have signed. Documents that presumably someone else had forged with my signature. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said carefully. I was never briefed about anything. The only thing my brother left me was an old key. Crestwood's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. Well, then we should clarify things. Why don't we schedule a proper meeting, bring in the attorneys, make sure everything is transparent? I agreed, smiled, and left my glass untouched on his mahogany desk. What he didn't know was that I'd left something else behind, a recording device disguised as a pen, capturing every word he'd say after I left. Nolan and I spent days combing through public records, tracing every transaction we could find related to the foundation. The rabbit hole went deep. Shell companies within shell companies, properties bought and sold through entities that existed only on paper. One name appeared far too often to be coincidence: Thornbridge Properties, LLC. Registered in Delaware, minimal public footprint, but involved in dozens of transactions totaling millions. When Nolan pulled up the registration documents, my blood ran cold. I was listed as co-founder and managing partner. My signature, my handwriting, my supposed authorization, all perfectly forged. They've been building a paper trail to frame you, Nolan whispered. If anyone investigates the foundation, all roads lead to you. The forged signatures, the shell companies, the questionable transactions, you'll look like the criminal. I stared at my own name on screen, used to hide someone else's crimes. How do we prove I didn't sign these? We need the originals, he said. Digital copies can be disputed, explained away. But physical documents can be analyzed, tested for age, fingerprints, everything. If we can get our hands on the originals, we can prove the forgeries. The question was where they'd be stored. Crestwood's office? Kavanaugh's files? Or somewhere else entirely, somewhere my brother might have found and hidden them? The answer came from an unexpected source. I was reviewing my photographs from the cottage cellar for the 100th time when I noticed something in one shot, a reflection in the glass door of a file cabinet. Behind me, barely visible, was what looked like a safe embedded in the wall, hidden behind one of the shelving units. I'd been so focused on the documents and ledger that I never searched the rest of the cellar thoroughly. I drove back to Norwood Hollow that afternoon. The cottage felt different now, less like a mystery and more like a trap my brother had carefully set. In the cellar, I moved the shelving unit that blocked the back wall. Sure enough, a small wall safe sat there, its combination lock worn but functional. I tried every significant date I could think of: our parents' anniversary, Charles's birthday, my birthday. Nothing worked. Then I remembered something. Charles used to joke that he'd never forget our old home phone number, the one from when we were kids. With shaking fingers, I spun the dial, 739-4672. The safe clicked open. Inside were three things: a accordion folder stuffed with documents, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. The envelope contained a letter from Charles, longer than the first one. "Meredith, if you've made it this far, you're stronger than I gave you credit for. I was wrong to doubt you. I was wrong about so many things." He explained how Kavanaugh had first approached him 5 years ago with investment opportunities that seemed legitimate. How slowly, gradually, those investments had turned into something else. Money moving through questionable channels, legitimate foundation funds, mixing with illegitimate sources. "By the time I realized what was happening, I was already implicated," he wrote. "They had my signature on documents I barely remembered signing, authorizations I'd made while trusting the wrong people. When I tried to stop it, they made it clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate." His handwriting grew shakier toward the end. "The USB contains everything: video surveillance from my office showing Kavanaugh and Crestwood forging documents, audio recordings of their conversations, bank statements proving the laundering. I've been gathering evidence for 6 months, but I'm not brave enough to use it. So I'm leaving it to the only person I trust, you." The final line made tears stream down my face. "I changed the trust documents to name you as primary beneficiary. It's dated 1 week before my death and witnessed by 3 people who have no connection to Crestwood or Kavanaugh. Whatever happens, the foundation is yours to save or expose as you see fit." I took the USB to Nolan's office immediately. We spent hours going through the files, and with each new video or document, my anger grew. There was Kavanaugh in Charles's office, practicing my signature. There was Crestwood explaining how they distribute foundation money through shell companies, keeping a percentage for themselves. There were bank statements showing millions flowing in from sources that should never have touched legitimate charity funds, offshore accounts, suspicious corporate entities, even some transactions that looked like they might be connected to organized crime. "This is enough to put them away for decades," Nolan said, his voice filled with awe and horror. "Your brother documented everything." But as we approached the final files, something made my blood run cold. A video dated the night before Charles died, showing him in his home office. He looked directly at the camera, knowing he was recording. "If you're watching this, I'm probably gone. They've been threatening me for weeks now, but I refuse to destroy the evidence. Kavanaugh called this morning and said we needed to meet tonight to resolve things. I know what that means. So I'm making this recording, stating clearly, if I die, it wasn't natural. Check my medicine cabinet. They've been suggesting I start taking heart medication for stress. I think they're planning to make it look like..." The video cut off abruptly. Nolan and I stared at each other, the horror of what we'd just witnessed settling over us. I went to the FBI that same afternoon. Agent Alina Rowe listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes as I presented each piece of evidence. The recordings, the documents, the forged signatures, the video of my brother's final warning. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied me carefully. "Mrs. Whitmore, what you're describing is conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and possibly murder. These are serious allegations against prominent attorneys." "I have proof," I said quietly. She nodded. "You do, and we'll investigate thoroughly. But I need you to understand, people like Kavanaugh and Crestwood have resources. They'll fight back hard. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Charles, about the key he'd left me, about the $47 million foundation my parents had built with good intentions. I've already lost my brother. I'm not about to lose his legacy too. Agent Rose smiled slightly. "Good. Because we're going to need your help. These men think they're untouchable. Let's prove them wrong." Over the next 3 weeks, I wore a wire to meetings with Kavanaugh and Crestwood. I played the part of the confused sister who was finally ready to cooperate, to sign whatever documents they wanted. And they, confident in their control, said everything we needed them to say. The arrests happened on a Tuesday morning. I watched from Agent Rose's car as federal agents entered Kavanaugh and Crestwood's downtown office. Within an hour, both men were let out in handcuffs, their faces showing shock and rage in equal measure. Kavanaugh saw me sitting in the car and mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. I didn't care. The news coverage was immediate and extensive. Prominent attorneys charged in elaborate fraud scheme, read one headline. Cleveland Foundation scandal. Millions laundered over decade, read another. Over the following weeks, more arrests came. Board members who'd knowingly participated, corporate partners who'd facilitated the laundering, even some politicians who'd accepted illegal campaign contributions. The Whitmore Foundation was frozen while authorities sorted through every transaction, separating legitimate charitable work from criminal activity. Agent Rowe kept me informed throughout the process. You did the right thing, she told me. Your brother would be proud. I wasn't sure about that. Charles had been afraid to act, had let fear control him until it was too late. But maybe, in his own way, he had acted by leaving me that key, by trusting me with the truth. 3 months after the arrests, I received a call from the Foundation's court-appointed administrator. The investigation was complete. $47 million had been recovered and returned to legitimate Foundation control. 6 months later, I stood on the steps of the newly renamed Vail Whitmore Foundation for honest work. We'd restructured everything, installed new board members with spotless backgrounds, implemented transparency measures that would prevent anyone from ever corrupting our mission again. The $47 million would fund scholarships for children of factory workers, support small business loans in underserved communities, and provide legal aid to families fighting corporate fraud. Everything my parents had originally intended, everything Charles had tried to protect. Nolan stood beside me at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. You could have kept a percentage, he said quietly. As the primary beneficiary, you were entitled to compensation for your work. I shook my head. This was never about the money. It was about making sure my brother didn't die for nothing. The media called me the woman with the rusty key, and the story went viral. The forgotten sister who'd exposed massive corruption and reclaimed her family's legacy. But I knew the real story. The key hadn't unlocked money or property. It had unlocked the truth. And truth, I'd learned, was worth far more than $47 million. As I walked away from the ceremony, a breeze stirred the trees around the Foundation building. For just a moment, it sounded like Charles's voice, saying what he should have said while he was alive. Thank you for being brave enough to finish what I started. They gave me nothing in the will, but they left me everything that mattered: truth, time, and the last word. Life has a strange way of revealing who truly stands beside you when everything falls apart. I was left with nothing but a rusty key, and that key unlocked more than a fortune. It opened the truth. It opened peace. Sometimes, revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's when the people who broke you have to watch you rebuild, with grace, with dignity, and with everything they said you'd never have. My name is Meredith Vail Whitmore, and I learned that the greatest inheritance isn't gold or property. It's clarity. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and stay glued to Sweet Revengein, where every story reminds you that karma never loses an address. Because here, revenge isn't cruel, it's beautifully earned.